You're listening to Manx Radio, and I'm Judith Lay, welcoming you to the podcast of the Manx Sky at Night with Howard Parkin.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Fastamai, and welcome to this month's edition of the Manx Sky at Night. Our resident astronomer Howard Parkin joins us once again to tell us what we can hope to see in the dark skies over our treasured island. Howard, Fastamai, and welcome.
Fastamai, Judith. Yes, it's great to be back here again and looking at the night sky, which of course, given this fantastic weather we've just had recently, it means that we're not going to see much in the way of sky in the astronomical point of view, but there's still lots to talk about, lots to see. And as we go through July, obviously we're going to start to get darker nights as we move away from Midsummer's Day, which was of course on the 21st of June. So the lights are in fact drawing in and we're on our way to Christmas already. So with that depressing point, let's just talk about what we can see.
OK, Howard, off you go, just as long as that is the last mention of Christmas that we'll have this month, please.
The long light and hopefully warm nights of our Isle of Man July sky means we don't get to see many opportunities to look at the sky because frankly it's just not dark enough. We still can see quite a few bright stars, and I always remember how I learnt my astronomy in Liverpool all those years ago, and because of light pollution you can only see the very bright stars, and it's the same in the middle of the summer because we can still see the very bright stars, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But as I've mentioned previously on these shows, we don't get beyond what we call astronomical twilight. From the end of May right through till early August, we don't get beyond astronomical twilight. And astronomical twilight is defined as when the sun is only between 12 and 18 degrees below our horizon. I've just been very fortunate to be going up to the top of Norway on a cruise not long ago, and in the Arctic Circle we were actually sun gazing at midnight because you couldn't actually see the stars at all because the sun was about 4.5 degrees above the horizon due north, because we're inside the Arctic Circle. But what is fascinating is when you start looking at the sky, as I say, you can still see some very bright stars. Now, a few weeks ago, the 9th of June to be precise, we did have the wonderful conjunction of the two planets, Venus and Jupiter. And what's happened now is Venus and Jupiter, which came together very close in the sky on the 9th of June, they've now parted company. Jupiter is now dropped down towards the evening twilight, very difficult to spot, maybe just about visible at the beginning of July, but you're not going to see it very easily, whereas Venus is still rising higher and higher in the sky, and it won't be till August, when it passes between the Earth and the Sun, that we'll lose Venus until it reappears in the morning sky later in the year. A word of caution though, when people ask me how come Jupiter and Venus are so close together, very roughly Venus is 70 million miles away from us, Jupiter 700 million miles away from us. So it's just purely a line of sight effect that we get to see these two together. And that was one of the best planetary conjunctions I've ever seen. And I hope a lot of people saw it and enjoyed it. I know we had mixed weather at the beginning of June with TT and everything else. Weather was not brilliant at the beginning of June, but let's face it, this last few days in particular, we've had some glorious weather, and I hope you've been able to enjoy them. Of course, the problem is, even with the light nights, I was outside stargazing a few nights ago. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and we couldn't see a single star. The only star we could see, or the only object I could see, was the moon and the planet Venus. But that's just the way it goes. But if you do get the chance to see some of these bright stars, as the sky gets darker as we head through July, you will see there are three very bright and distinctive stars in the sky, which really, you can't miss them. If you look towards the southern sky, you'll find on the left-hand side, you'll find a bright star, which is the star Deneb in the constellation of Cygnus. And upper right to it, depending what time you're looking, is the star Vega in the constellation of Vega, the lyre of the harp. And then below that, there's a third star, bright star called Altair, which is the brightest star in the constellation of Aquila the Eagle. Now, if you can see right down south to as far south as you can go, you might see a bright star clipping the horizon, which has got a noticeably reddish coloured hue to it. This reddish coloured star is the star Antares, and the name Antares actually means rival of Mars. Ant Ares, it's Latin for rival of Mars. And it's one of the biggest stars in the sky. Its diameter is bigger than the orbit of Jupiter. Huge star, which is why it's red. It's so big, it shines red hot rather than white hot because of its massive size. And that is only visible at around this time of the year. So you really need to be looking low on the southern horizon, and you can't mistake this very bright object. We don't see the whole of the constellation of Scorpio because it's so low on our horizon, but we do get to see the other stars I mentioned earlier, which I'll talk about in just a moment.
Antares, a rival to Mars, something else for us to look out for as we scan the skies in the weeks ahead. Howard, what's the chances of noctilucent clouds at this time?
Yes, July is one of the best times of the year to see what we call noctilucent clouds. Noctilucent means night shining, of course. That's words I've used with you before. And these clouds are very high, about 50 miles above the Earth's surface. And they're usually very distinctively white or silvery or electric blue in colour, quite often seen in our summer skies above the dusk or the dawn horizons of the Isle of Man. And they are really amazing to see. And they have a sort of wavy-like, a very thin wave-like pattern, which indicates that very strong winds at this height are whipping them along into a sort of line, a linear sort of direction. There is actually some evidence that these clouds in frequency and intensity may be linked to atmospheric warming. And with this weather we've had recently, it's poignant to realise that maybe this is a sign of the fact that the Earth is definitely heating up. We won't go into the details of how and why, but it is with mixed feelings we view and marvel these fascinating objects in our night sky. If we turn around now to the northern sky, we look at the traditional northern sky and look for the pole star, you'll find that the plough, the stars of the Big Dipper are now dropping down back towards the horizon, towards what we call their more familiar autumnal position when the plough sits along our northern horizon. It's standing up at the moment, dropping down steadily as we go through the month of July. You'll see it dropping more and more. And by the time we get to mid-September, the plough, as I say, will be sitting on the northern horizon. During the summer months, it lies to the left of the northern circumpolar sky, and the two stars, the lowest two stars we see of the plough, they point directly to the star Polaris, the pole star. And the pole star, of course, denotes the northern celestial sky. When you look at Polaris, you're looking due north, and the height of Polaris above our horizon gives you your latitude, which from the Isle of Man is around 54 degrees. And I know I've mentioned this before, but if you want to measure the height of Polaris above your horizon, it's 5 fists high, 5.5 fists high. Your fist extended at arm's length is about 10 degrees. And that's how we can judge how high it is. And of course, wherever you are in the world, if you can see the pole star, its height gives you your latitude. Unless, of course, you go below the equator, in which case you won't see it at all, in which case you get lost, unless you use the Southern Cross and other features in the southern sky, which do the same thing for us, but not as effectively as we see it in the northern sky.
Now, Howard, you know perfectly well I can get myself lost even without going anywhere near the equator. So, any chance we can get back onto familiar ground? Or should that be skies?
The other feature that is always worth mentioning at this time of the year is that of the Milky Way. The Milky Way, of course, our own galaxy. We used to think there's the universe comprised of one galaxy, just the Milky Way, but the Milky Way is in fact our galaxy, and there are thousands and thousands and millions of other galaxies. But at this particular time of the year, the Milky Way takes on a different appearance. It stretches very much right across the sky, and if you look to the south again, near Scorpio, I was mentioning earlier, in the star Antares, these regions have got what we call the dust and star clouds in them, which gives us these dark lanes or these dark patches in the sky, which are actually dust and gas that's illuminated by stars behind it. And it really is quite dramatic. It is a great time of the year to look for it, but you need to be looking on a moonless night. Now, the full moon is in a few weeks' time, so once we get towards the end of July, look for the Milky Way. A pair of binoculars will always help you look for it much better, and it can be seen almost stretching from the west to the eastern horizon, passing almost directly overhead. And if you look slightly towards the west as you look up, you'll see what seems to be a bit of a gap in the Milky Way. This is known as the Cygnus Rift. It looks like a rip in a veil, and we sometimes call Cygnus the dagger that's ripping a hole in the Milky Way. And it really is a fantastic sight to look for. But again, you've got to get a dark sky, so really towards the end of July is the best time to look for that. I've already mentioned the 3 stars of this summer triangle: Deneb in Cygnus, Vega in Lyra, and Altair in Aquila. And these 3 stars themselves are worth looking for individually. Vega, the brightest of the 3, is only 25 light years away. It seems to be the brightest of the 3 of them. And it's regarded as what we call a standard candle. The star Altair at the bottom is in fact a little bit fainter and a mere 16.7 light years away. Whereas Deneb, the fainter of the 3 stars, is a massive 2,600 light years away. It is actually one of the most luminous stars in the whole night sky. And if you were to place all the stars at a similar distance, Deneb would far outshine, in fact, most of the stars in the sky. We reckon that Deneb is equal to about 200,000 times the brightness of our own sun. It really is an impressive sight. There is another constellation in the sky that lots of people have heard of course, and that's Hercules the Strongman. And Hercules the Strongman is to the right of the summer triangle, these 3 stars I mentioned earlier. Very faint constellation, but it was the goddess Hera who was feeding Hercules in the sky when Hercules bit her. And so the baby was pushed away, the baby Hercules was pushed away, and the milk spilt from its mouth formed the Milky Way. And as a consequence, Hercules inherited great strength and power and was later tasked with undertaking the 12 labours that he accomplished, and was eventually placed in the sky as a reward for all eternity.
We love a bit of a legend, don't we? Now, Howard, it's nearly time for our music break. But to take us there, anything else we need to look out for in the coming weeks?
I just want to finish off this section of tonight's show with a mention about the planets. I've already mentioned about Venus and Jupiter. They're still just about visible in the early evening sky after sunset in July, although Jupiter, as I say, drops out of sight very, very quickly indeed. Venus can be at just after sunset, about half an hour after sunset. It's about 20 degrees, so that's 2 fists high above the horizon, and very, very bright indeed. For those purists amongst you, the magnitude, the brightness of Venus is minus 4.1. Only the sun and the moon get brighter than that. Jupiter can be seen, as I say, dropping down towards the horizon, very, very low indeed, and it will be visible from the west coast of the Isle of Man about an hour after sunset on Tynwald Day. On that night, it's just 5 degrees above the horizon. So if you want to spot Jupiter for yourself on Tynwald Day, draw an imaginary line from Venus down to where the major glow of the sun is. Never look at the sun, I've already told you that before, but follow the line down from Venus to where the sunset glow is at its brightest, and then you might just catch the planet Jupiter there as it heads towards what we call solar conjunction when it goes around the back of the sun on July the 29th. Meanwhile, in the morning sky, if you're an early riser, we can see the planet Saturn and Mars and indeed Uranus around Tynwald Day, July the 4th, July the 5th. And we also have Mercury reappearing in the morning sky towards the end of this month.
Thank you, Howard. And when you said you wanted Adele's Skyfall, I thought maybe you were trying to hint at your part in a new James Bond film. But apparently, no. It's all to do with a space story that we'll hear in part 2.
This is the end. Hold your breath and count to 10. Feel the earth move and then hear my heart burst again. For this is the end. I've drowned and dreamt this moment, so overdue I owe them. Swept away, I'm stolen. Let the sky fall when it crumbles. We will stand tall, face it all together.
Adele's Skyfall, our music choice on this month's edition of the Manx Sky at Night with Howard Parkin. And now let's turn our attention to just some of the many space stories in the news recently.
Well, Judith, where do I start? There's been so much going on in recent weeks and months, I just struggle to keep pace with it. I know we spoke last month about the New Glenn rocket blowing up and SpaceX's Starship 12, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, because since then there's been so much news and there's been so much going on. Announcements by the NASA administrator, there's stuff going on with Mars, there's the Chinese, there's a telescope rescue mission. So we'll start at the beginning. The New Glenn rocket, which was being scheduled to launch some communication satellites into orbit for Amazon, basically that explosion was catastrophic in so many ways. The New Glenn rocket, which is the second generation rocket that the Jeff Bezos' company Blue Origins have, New Shepard being their first one, New Glenn is their second, and their next one, the heavy lift vehicle, is the New Armstrong. All names there of famous American astronauts. Well, the New Glenn rocket has only been launched about 3 or 4 times so far, and this was being tested. It wasn't a launch, it was being tested for a future launch in a few days later. And of course, it catastrophically blew up, as we spoke of last month. But it didn't just blow up, it took half the launch pad out with it as well. And this really was a huge disaster for not just Blue Origins, but also to NASA, because they're an integral part of their plans to go back to the moon with Artemis, was to use the New Glenn rocket, which was going to launch the Blue Moon lander. Now, since that explosion, Blue Origins has said they hope to get the launch pad back up and running by the end of 2026, which seems a bit of a tall order when you consider how much damage was caused to the pad. But they have got another pad that they could possibly convert. And upon examination of the damage caused to the launch pad by that launch, the mobile launcher and the tower was not damaged severely. So they can repurpose those and hopefully use them in the, I won't say in the near future, but certainly before the end of 2026. So that's the first step. The second catastrophe that happened was, of course, it wasn't so much of a catastrophe, but Starship launched their brand new version 3 of their Starship. And this, by all accounts, went extremely well. The only problem was the actual Starship itself landed as predicted in the Indian Ocean, didn't make an orbital flight. It did a suborbital flight, went all the way around the world to the Indian Ocean from Cape Kennedy. And then it landed in the sea as was planned and was lost. That was always planned. It did explode when it landed in the sea, but they're not too worried about that. Basically, it was a self-destruct landing. But what the problem has become for them now is that the launch vehicle, the first stage of the Falcon Heavy rocket, when it separated from the Starship itself, when it was almost into orbit, almost into the height it was going, the engines didn't fire. And the engines didn't fire, so as a result, that rocket, that booster, came back down to Earth and crash landed into the Gulf of Mexico. Again, as scheduled, it was never going to be recovered, but it didn't land under control. That's the issue. So the US Federal Aviation Authority, the FAA, have launched an investigation. And the minute they launch an investigation, that means that the whole thing is now on hold. So you've got the two vehicles, the two companies vying to provide NASA with a lander to land on the moon in Artemis. Artemis 4 is the earliest landing date or mission. Both of them have been curtailed by accidents. The FAA are notoriously a long time coming with their results, and I've not heard the latest on this one, because I know Starship were hoping to launch their next rocket, which was hopefully potentially going to go into orbit and come back down into a soft landing. That was the original plan. Whether that now is the case, we'll have to wait and see. So in the meantime, the Chinese are pushing ahead with their own plans to send an unmanned vehicle to the moon to land at the South Pole, and the Chinese are really pushing ahead with their moon landing plans, which they've said are for 2030 or beyond, and NASA's plans were for 2028 or beyond. So at face value, the US would get there first, but well, who knows with all these things going on. In the meantime, the Artemis 3 space crew mission has just been announced. They've decided this mission now is not going to go to the moon, it's going to go to Earth orbit, and it's going to test the two landers, the New Glenn lander, Blue Moon, and the SpaceX lander, the HLS, Human Landing System lander. This mission, which is meant to launch by the end of 2027, is dependent on the landers being ready to launch. At the moment, both are in hold. New Glenn because of their launch pad explosion, and SpaceX because of the FAA investigation into their launch system. But NASA have gone ahead and announced their Artemis 3 crew, which is now commanded by a chap called Randy Bresnik, who I had the honour to meet on a Viking cruise ship some years ago. He was on the ship along with Victor Glover from Artemis 2, so there's a nice connection there. And this crew are all scheduled to launch, as I say, by the end of 2027. In the meantime, Jared Isaacman, the NASA administrator, has said they're not going to launch the Gateway project. There's not going to be a lunar orbiting laboratory anymore. They're going to go straight to a lunar landing, and the Gateway is on hold, but not postponed. Basically, they're going to go to the moon, establish a lunar base, and then eventually they'll establish a lunar orbiting outpost as well. Whether it'll still be called Gateway or they change the name, we'll have to wait and see. And it goes on, because only a few days ago, it was announced by NASA that there would be a big announcement next week about the architecture and the design and the contractors that are going to build the various parts of the lunar base. Remind listeners again, this is the base that's going to be established near the south pole of the moon, where we believe water can be extracted for fuel and for drinking and everything else. And literally, with every week, there seems to be a different announcement. As I say, it's a struggle to keep up with it.
Well, while we all get our breath back, you included, Howard, I believe that Mars is back in the news again with several stories that we need to know about.
Okay, so Mars, of course, which is the ultimate goal of the Artemis program, is to get people not just to the moon, but get them to Mars. And Mars has been in the news very much recently. Sadly, the MAVEN mission, the Mars MAVEN mission, which was an orbiting spacecraft looking into the Martian atmosphere, that spacecraft last contacted with Earth in December last year, and NASA have been trying repeatedly to get back in touch with it and haven't been able to do so. So officially, the MAVEN mission, which was an outstanding success, was meant to last for about 3 years, lasted for about 12 in the end, has been a great success, sent back all sorts of information about the Martian atmosphere, how the Martian atmosphere evolved, and how the surface conditions on Mars possibly evolved as well. So that mission is now finished, and we look forward to the next major Mars mission. You've got a mission going later this year, the Blue and Gold Mars Escapade missions, but the European Space Agency have recently announced that they're going to hope for a 2028 launch of the ExoMars mission that was delayed from 2020. So more news about that obviously near the time. The really exciting news for Mars, however, was literally only a few days ago. You may recall I said some time ago about Perseverance has almost definitely discovered signs of ancient biological life on the red planet. Well, they've made a further discovery which likely shows that life once existed on Mars. This Perseverance discovery is probably likely to be caused by some form of biological activity on Mars in the way ancient past. This is, we think, life at some stage or other on Mars evolved, and then the situation on Mars where its atmosphere was stripped off and all the oceans boiled away, they think this life never got beyond literally amoeba and biological small things like bacteria. Very exciting news. And linked into that was another announcement by the administrator of NASA, Jared Isaacman, that they're going to launch their first ever nuclear-powered rocket to Mars, and this nuclear-powered rocket is going to carry a spacecraft called Skyfall, hence my choice of music. And the Skyfall mission isn't going to go to the expense of a complicated landing on the red planet. They're going to go into the what they call an EDL, entry, descent and landing, but forget the landing. They're going to enter the Martian atmosphere, get to a speed where they can basically slow down sufficiently to dispatch a small robotic flyer. And each one of these flyers, there will be 2 of them, each one of them will be carrying 3 helicopters. And these 3 helicopters will be dispatched from this vehicle that's descending into the Martian atmosphere towards the surface. These helicopters will take off from that and will continue to fly around Mars, all 6 of them, and they will land, and then they will take off again, and they'll look for landing sites, they'll look for ice, they'll look for geological features, and so on. A really exciting mission, and one that has been proved by the Ingenuity helicopter, which was carried on Perseverance when they landed on Mars in 2021.
Howard, I'm sorry to say that once again we're being beaten by the clock. So what's our final space story for this month?
And Judith, my final story for you. You may recall a few years ago now, Intuitive Machines landed on the moon, and on board with the Intuitive Machines spacecraft was a miniature version of the data center that Chris Stott's company, Texas, was hoping to get on the moon as a data center, and Intuitive Machines did that for them very successfully. Well, Intuitive Machines have just bought Goonhilly Downs. Goonhilly Downs is the big Earth station based down the bottom of Cornwall, and that Earth station there has been bought by Intuitive Machines as part of their plans to establish communication networks, not just with the moon but with spacecraft in orbit as well. So as I said at the beginning, it's all go in space at the moment. We struggle to keep pace, but we'll always give you the latest we can. And in next month's programme, we'll of course be talking about the solar eclipse, which takes place on the 12th of August, and I'll give you all the details about that and how we can see a 93% eclipse of the sun from the Isle of Man.
As always, Howard, it's been good to catch up with you. We look forward to welcoming you back into the studio on the final Sunday in the month of July. But for now, it's Grumaied Howard Parkin.
Bye for now.